In my belief, if we look at historic data, we might well expect 2012 to come back in largely similar form in other years. So it's been a good learning lesson, and we're still in the process of learning what to do with soils that were created from cultivation operations back in the spring of 2012, and obviously exacerbated by rainfall and then the very wet harvest that we had. So we've had effectively a double rainfall pattern in 2012, which has exacerbated the situation. So can we learn? Well, we might go back to 2011 and look at data from a single year and say that the strategy of cultivating seed beds, our view at Cambridge is that soils are worked excessively. And since about 70% of UK potato production is grown on soils which are structurally unstable, then excessive working of those soils is leading to problems such as excessive consolidation, slumping, and faced with the rainfall patterns that we've got here and the addition of soil compaction in wet seasons, we end up with difficult growing conditions for the plants. So 2011 was a contrasting season in being extremely dry in the early spring, where people could cultivate to whatever depth they wanted to, and our experimental work then showed that actually we could cultivate soils appreciably shallower than the standard used by the industry when using destoning technology, and still not have a marked influence on yield or quality. By cultivating soils deeper, and conversely, we couldn't gain any advantage from deeper rootability or increased access to water and nutrients. So by and large, we found very little evidence in 2011 that cultivation depth made a very big difference. Now 2011 was the contrast in being extremely dry when we worked soils. 2012 was obviously a season of started dry and got progressively wetter, which is normally the opposite of what happens in growing seasons planted in the spring. So the lessons we've learned are more to do with cultivation depth. Yes, we can repeat effects from previous years' experiments, whereby if we cultivate soil deeply on soils that can deform plastically because their soil water content is too high, we can get yield disadvantage. In other words, we get a yield loss by cultivating soil too deeply. But interestingly and useful for me as a researcher to convince growers that our research is of practical use, is in wet seasons we've found that actually cultivating those same soils which deform plastically can actually lead to yield increases where we avoid creating that level of compaction. And the way we avoid it is by coming slightly shallower than the standard depth used by the industry. So this has given us an advantage that we can say we can prepare seed beds shallower, which goes with all the concomitant advantages of faster, less machinery, less labour, with reduced diesel cost and the opportunity to plant more acres in a given time. Faced with weather windows like we were this year, the opportunity to actually cultivate soil and plant faster in narrow weather windows gives us a real advantage for growers that are clearly under pressure in terms of the acres they need to plant with the equipment that they've got. So 2012 has given us very good data on the possibility of actually cultivating soils at different depths depending on the soil type and the soil wetness. And that will be followed up by this season, 2013 and 2014, to produce data to really support that evidence or produce different evidence. So we've got a practical set of recommendations for growers as to what they should do. Many growers have a one cultivation operation fits all. We believe that many of those operations could be changed slightly in terms of depth or timing, and we end up with better results. Unfortunately, when early March and April come and the sun shines, people tend to get out their equipment and off they'll go again. So the lessons have got to be there. Retain the memory in your lesson of 2012, and ultimately that will help you. So what are the practical messages that we need to deliver are actually trying to achieve more when soil is not in a fit status to cultivate, could be shallower rather than actually deeper to try and strive to get what you're achieving as a seed bed. So shallower, not deeper, is the simple practical solution in 2013.